Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Code Your English, the place where you learn English, unlock opportunities, and change your life. Let me begin with a simple question that may feel uncomfortably familiar. How often do you end your day feeling exhausted, yet slightly confused about what you actually achieved? You were active all day. You answered messages, checked notifications, switched between tasks, and stayed productive from morning until night. And yet, when everything finally becomes quiet, there is a strange feeling that something important is missing. This experience is not unusual. In fact, for many people today, it has become normal. Modern life moves fast, and it rarely allows space for stillness. From the moment we wake up, our attention is pulled in many directions. Emails arrive before breakfast. News updates, social media, work demands, and personal responsibilities compete for our focus. We rush from one task to another, often without pause, believing that constant movement means progress. Being busy has become a symbol of value. If we are busy, we feel needed. If we are busy, we feel relevant. If we are busy, we feel successful. But here is the paradox. Despite all this activity, many people feel stuck. They work longer hours, yet their most important goals remain unchanged. They stay occupied, yet they feel unfulfilled. They do many things, but few of those things seem to truly matter in the long run. This is where an uncomfortable question begins to appear. Is being busy the same as being effective? Or have we confused movement with direction? We rarely stop to question this because busyness feels safe. It gives us a sense of control. It protects us from silence, from reflection, and sometimes from difficult decisions. When we are busy, we don't have to ask ourselves whether our efforts are meaningful. We don't have to face the possibility that we are spending our energy on the wrong things. Busyness keeps us distracted, and distraction often feels easier than clarity. This is not a criticism, and it is not a call to work harder. It is simply an invitation to observe, to notice how easily a day can be filled, and how rarely it is designed, to notice how often productivity is measured by speed and volume, rather than by depth and impact. When we begin to observe without judgment, we create space for understanding. So before we talk about improvement, strategies, or change, we need to slow down and ask a more basic question. What does it really mean to be busy? And more importantly, what are we busy doing? From here, we can begin to look beyond personal experience and examine the deeper meaning of busyness itself. Defining busyness: activity without direction. To understand why busyness feels so familiar, yet so unsatisfying, we first need to define what busyness really is. Busyness is not the same as hard work, and it is not the same as meaningful effort. At its core, busyness is constant activity without clear direction. It is motion without intention. A busy person is doing many things, but those actions are not always connected to a deeper purpose or a clear outcome. From the outside, busyness looks impressive. From the inside, it often feels scattered and draining. One of the clearest signs of busyness is the way attention becomes fragmented. Instead of focusing fully on one task, the mind jumps rapidly from one thing to another. An email arrives, and we answer it immediately. A notification appears, and we check it without thinking. We begin one task, pause it halfway, and move to another, believing that multitasking is efficient. In reality, this constant switching creates mental noise. Energy is spent on starting and restarting rather than on progressing. The result is movement, but very little depth. Busyness also depends heavily on constant checking. Checking messages, checking updates, checking tasks, checking what others are doing. These actions create the feeling of engagement, but they rarely create value. They keep us alert, but not focused. Over time, this habit trains the brain to seek stimulation rather than completion. We feel active, even productive, yet the most important work remains untouched because it requires sustained attention and mental presence. This is why busyness often feels productive even when it is not. The brain rewards activity with a sense of accomplishment, even if the activity is superficial. Crossing small tasks off a list can feel satisfying, but satisfaction is not the same as progress. Many busy days end with dozens of completed actions and very few meaningful results. The effort was real, but the impact was limited. This creates a quiet frustration that is easy to ignore, but difficult to escape. Another important aspect of busyness is that it is usually reactive. Busy people respond to what appears in front of them rather than choosing what truly matters. Emails decide the agenda. Urgent requests replace important goals. Other people's priorities become our own. In this reactive state, time is controlled by external demands instead of internal decisions. We are not designing our day, we are surviving it. Because busyness is reactive, it rarely aligns with long-term growth. It keeps us busy with the immediate, the urgent, and the visible, while quietly pushing aside the essential but demanding work. Deep thinking, learning, planning, and reflection do not feel urgent, so they are easily postponed. Busyness fills the schedule, but leaves little space for meaning. Understanding busyness in this way is not meant to create guilt. It is meant to create clarity. When we see busyness as activity without direction, we can finally understand why it is so common and so comfortable. It requires little thought and no courage. But once this definition becomes clear, another question naturally follows. If busyness is easy and reactive, what does it take to be effective? And why does effectiveness feel so much rarer in a world that never stops moving? What effectiveness really means. If busyness is activity without direction, then effectiveness is its quiet opposite. Effectiveness is not about doing more things or filling every moment with action. It is about choosing the right actions and committing to them fully. An effective person understands that time and energy are limited resources, so they are careful about where those resources go. Instead of asking, "How much can I do today?" they ask, "What truly matters today?" This shift in thinking changes everything. Effectiveness places outcomes above effort. In a busy culture, effort is often admired. Long hours, visible struggle, and constant motion are seen as signs of dedication. But effectiveness is not interested in how hard something feels. It is interested in what actually changes as a result. Two people may work for the same amount of time, yet one creates real progress while the other creates noise. The difference is not motivation or intelligence, but clarity. Effectiveness is guided by clear goals and meaningful results, not by exhaustion. One of the most important qualities of effectiveness is the habit of thinking before acting. Busy people act first and think later, if at all. Effective people pause. They reflect. They consider consequences, priorities, and alternatives before they move. This pause may look like inactivity, but it is actually preparation. It prevents wasted effort and protects focus. In a world that rewards speed, this deliberate slowness can feel uncomfortable, even risky, yet it is essential for meaningful progress. This is where the contrast between speed and direction becomes clear. Speed without direction leads to exhaustion. Direction without speed leads to stagnation. Effectiveness balances the two by ensuring that movement is purposeful. Walking slowly toward the right destination is more valuable than running quickly in the wrong direction. Effort only becomes powerful when it is aligned with intention. Without that alignment, even the strongest effort produces weak results. Effectiveness is also strategic, which means it is often invisible. Much of the work happens internally. Decisions are made quietly, distractions are removed privately, priorities are chosen without announcement. From the outside, this can look like doing less. Effective people may seem calm, unhurried, even relaxed, while others rush around them. This calm is not laziness. It is the result of clarity. When you know what matters, there is no need to react to everything. Because effectiveness does not always create visible busyness, it is rarely celebrated. There are fewer messages sent, fewer meetings attended, fewer tasks checked off. Yet the impact is deeper and longer lasting. Effective work builds skills, strengthens understanding, and moves life forward in meaningful ways. It creates progress that continues even after the effort has ended. And this is precisely why effectiveness is rare. It demands awareness, patience, and the courage to resist constant activity. It requires saying no, slowing down, and accepting that valuable work may not look impressive in the moment. In a world addicted to movement, choosing effectiveness is a quiet rebellion. But it is also the only path to progress that truly lasts. Why busyness is easy and effectiveness is hard. Busyness is easy, not because it is useful, but because it feels good in the moment. It provides instant feedback. When we answer a message, complete a small task, or respond to a request, we receive an immediate sense of progress. The brain reacts positively to this quick reward. There is relief in feeling needed, comfort in feeling active, and reassurance in seeing visible proof of effort. Effectiveness, on the other hand, rarely offers such fast satisfaction. Its rewards are delayed, and in a fast-moving world, patience is increasingly difficult to practice. Social expectations also play a powerful role. Modern culture tends to reward what can be seen. Long hours, full calendars, and constant availability are often interpreted as commitment and ambition. People who appear busy are praised for their dedication, while those who work quietly and selectively may be misunderstood. Effectiveness does not always create a visible performance. Its results often appear later, sometimes long after the effort has been made. Because of this, choosing effectiveness can feel socially risky. It may look like doing less, even when it means achieving more. Another reason effectiveness is hard is that it requires discomfort. To be effective, we must delay gratification. We must resist the urge to respond immediately, to react emotionally, or to fill silence with activity. We must focus on tasks that demand concentration, thinking, and patience. Deep work is mentally demanding. It forces us to face complexity instead of escaping into simple actions. Busyness offers an easy escape from this challenge. It keeps us occupied without asking us to engage fully. Thinking deeply also requires clarity about priorities, and clarity can be uncomfortable. When we slow down, we are forced to ask difficult questions. What really matters? What am I avoiding? What should I stop doing? Busyness protects us from these questions. It fills our time so completely that reflection feels unnecessary or even impossible. In this way, busyness can become a form of avoidance. It allows us to feel productive while quietly postponing decisions that require courage. There is also a fear attached to slowing down. Many people worry that if they stop moving, they will fall behind. They fear being judged, replaced, or forgotten. This fear keeps them reacting instead of choosing. Yet constant reaction creates exhaustion, not progress. Effectiveness asks us to trust that thoughtful action is more powerful than constant motion. This trust is difficult to develop in a world that moves quickly and measures value loudly. Because busyness is emotionally comfortable, socially rewarded, and mentally easier, it becomes the default mode of living. Effectiveness, by contrast, demands self-awareness and discipline. It asks us to tolerate uncertainty, to work without immediate applause, and to focus even when distractions are tempting. These qualities are rare not because they are impossible, but because they are demanding. Understanding these psychological and social forces helps us move beyond blame. The problem is not a lack of motivation or intelligence. It is the environment we live in and the habits we have learned. Once we see why busyness feels natural and effectiveness feels difficult, we are ready to examine how this tension appears in everyday life. From theory, we can now move into real situations where this struggle becomes visible. Busyness in modern life. Everyday examples. To truly understand how busyness shapes our lives, it helps to look at ordinary situations where it appears normal and even necessary. In the workplace, busyness often hides behind professional language and routines. A typical day may be filled with meetings, email conversations, progress reports, and quick tasks that demand immediate attention. Calendars become crowded not because every meeting is essential, but because being present feels responsible. Messages are answered quickly, sometimes without reflection, simply to show availability. At the end of the day, there is proof of effort everywhere, yet the most important work may still be waiting. Meetings, for example, often create the illusion of productivity. People talk, ideas are shared, and notes are taken. However, many meetings end without clear decisions or meaningful action. They consume time and energy while offering little progress. The same is true for emails. Writing and replying to messages can feel urgent and important, but much of this communication is repetitive or unnecessary. Busyness grows quietly in these moments, disguised as professionalism and teamwork. Busyness also appears clearly in the way many people approach learning. A student may study for long hours, read many pages, and watch numerous videos, yet see little improvement. The effort is real, but the method is ineffective. Time is spent passively consuming information rather than actively engaging with it. Studying becomes a habit of repetition instead of understanding. The learner feels busy and committed, but progress remains slow. This can be especially frustrating because the problem is not a lack of effort, but a lack of direction. In personal life, busyness often fills the space where meaning could grow. Social calendars become full. Appointments, obligations, and plans leave little room for rest or reflection. People move quickly from one activity to another, believing that a full schedule equals a full life. Yet many feel disconnected, tired, and unsatisfied. There is activity without presence, interaction without depth. Even leisure becomes another task to complete, rather than an experience to enjoy. Technology intensifies this pattern. Phones create constant access to information, people, and responsibilities. Free moments disappear as soon as they appear. Waiting, resting, or simply thinking feels uncomfortable because it is unfamiliar. We check instead of pause. We scroll instead of reflect. This behavior keeps us occupied, but it rarely nourishes us. These everyday examples are not extreme cases. They are common, normal, and socially accepted. That is why busyness is so difficult to notice. It blends into daily life and becomes invisible. Yet once we recognize these patterns, something important changes. We begin to see our own habits more clearly. We start asking ourselves quiet questions. Which activities truly move my life forward? Which ones simply fill time? This shift from observation to self-awareness is subtle, but it is powerful. It is the first step toward choosing effectiveness over constant activity. The cost of constant busyness. At first, constant busyness does not seem dangerous. In fact, it often feels necessary. Days are full, responsibilities are met, and life appears to move forward. But over time, the cost of this endless activity begins to appear, quietly and gradually. One of the first signs is mental fatigue. When the mind is constantly switching between tasks, it never fully rests. Attention becomes scattered, and thinking feels heavier than it should. Even simple decisions start to require more effort. Creativity fades, not because ideas are gone, but because there is no space for them to form. When busyness becomes a permanent state, clarity also begins to disappear. Goals become unclear, not because they are unimportant, but because there is no time to reflect on them. Values remain unexamined. People continue moving, but they are no longer sure why. Life becomes a series of reactions instead of a deliberate journey. Without moments of pause, it is difficult to ask meaningful questions about direction, purpose, and priorities. Busyness fills the schedule, while quietly emptying the sense of meaning. Another hidden cost appears in the way progress becomes shallow. Skills develop slowly because learning requires focus and repetition, not constant interruption. Relationships weaken because real connection needs attention and presence. Conversations become rushed. Listening becomes partial. Time is shared, but depth is missing. Personal growth also suffers as reflection and self-awareness are replaced by speed and distraction. Growth looks like movement, but it lacks foundation. Emotionally, constant busyness creates pressure. Stress becomes familiar, almost normal. The nervous system remains active, rarely calm. Small problems feel overwhelming, and patience becomes harder to maintain. Over time, frustration grows. People work hard, yet feel unsatisfied. They try to do more, believing that effort will fix the problem, but the pressure only increases. Eventually, exhaustion appears. Burnout is not always dramatic. Sometimes it arrives quietly, as a loss of motivation, joy, or curiosity. What makes these consequences especially challenging is that they are often ignored. Society encourages endurance. Rest is postponed. Reflection is seen as unnecessary. Many people continue pushing forward, believing that this state of constant effort is simply how modern life works. Yet living this way slowly disconnects people from themselves. They become efficient at doing, but unfamiliar with being. This reflection is not meant to create guilt or fear. It is meant to create awareness. Busyness itself is not the enemy. The problem arises when it becomes automatic, unquestioned, and endless. When activity replaces intention, the cost becomes too high. Recognizing this cost invites a gentle but important question. What kind of success am I pursuing? Is it measured by how full my days are, or by how meaningful my life feels? From this question, a different way of living becomes possible. The mindset shift from doing more to doing what matters. If constant busyness creates exhaustion and confusion, then the solution does not begin with better time management or stronger discipline. It begins with a shift in mindset. Effectiveness starts not with action, but with better questions. Instead of asking, "What should I do next?" we begin to ask, "What truly matters right now?" This simple change moves attention away from urgency and toward importance. It encourages intention instead of reaction, and clarity instead of noise. Asking better questions naturally leads to prioritization. Prioritization is not about doing everything in the right order. It is about choosing what deserves energy and what does not. In a busy life, everything feels important because everything demands attention. Effectiveness challenges this assumption. It asks us to accept that some tasks, conversations, and commitments do not deserve our time, even if they are urgent or socially expected. This is not neglect. It is discernment. Intentional choice is at the heart of this shift. When we act intentionally, we decide in advance how we want to spend our time and focus. We stop allowing external demands to design our days for us. This does not mean ignoring responsibility. It means aligning responsibility with values. When actions reflect what matters most, effort becomes lighter, even when the work is challenging. One of the most difficult but powerful skills in this process is learning to say no. Saying no is often misunderstood as selfish or uncooperative. In reality, it is strategic. Every yes is a commitment of time, energy, and attention. When we say yes to everything, we silently say no to what matters most. Effectiveness requires the courage to protect focus, even when doing so feels uncomfortable. A thoughtful no can create more value than an automatic yes. Another important realization in this mindset shift is that fewer actions can create greater results. Modern culture often connects success with quantity: more tasks, more hours, more output. Effectiveness challenges this belief. It recognizes that certain actions carry more weight than others. A single focused conversation can achieve more than dozens of emails. 1 hour of deep work can be more valuable than an entire day of scattered effort. Impact does not come from volume. It comes from alignment. This way of thinking invites us to pause and reconsider how we measure progress. Do we measure it by how tired we feel at the end of the day, or by how much closer we are to something meaningful? Do we celebrate completion, or do we value contribution? These questions do not demand immediate answers. Their purpose is reflection. They create space for awareness. Importantly, this shift is not about perfection. It is not about creating an ideal schedule or following strict rules. It is about developing sensitivity to what matters and courage to act accordingly. Effectiveness grows slowly, through consistent, conscious choices. As this mindset settles, practical changes begin to appear naturally. Not as a checklist to follow, but as a way of thinking that quietly reshapes daily life. Practicing effectiveness in daily life. Practicing effectiveness in daily life does not require dramatic changes or strict systems. It begins with a simple but powerful habit: slowing down before acting. This pause creates distance between impulse and decision. Instead of reacting immediately to every message, request, or interruption, we give ourselves a moment to think. In that moment, we can ask whether an action is truly necessary or simply urgent. This small delay protects attention and reduces unnecessary effort. Over time, it transforms the way we experience our days. Another key practice is focusing on one meaningful task at a time. Multitasking may appear efficient, but it weakens concentration and reduces quality. When attention is divided, progress becomes shallow. Effectiveness, by contrast, values depth over speed. By choosing a single important task and giving it full presence, we allow our best thinking to emerge. This focused state often feels calm, even when the work is challenging, because the mind is no longer fighting in multiple directions. Designing days around impact rather than urgency is another essential shift. Urgent tasks demand immediate attention, but they are not always important. Effective days are shaped by priorities, not interruptions. This means identifying a small number of actions that truly matter and organizing time around them. When impact becomes the guide, the day gains structure and meaning. Less time is spent reacting, and more time is invested in work that creates lasting value. Creating space for deep work and reflection is also critical. Deep work requires uninterrupted time, mental clarity, and intention. It is where learning accelerates, skills develop, and complex problems are solved. Reflection, on the other hand, allows us to learn from experience. It helps us recognize patterns, adjust behavior, and refine direction. Without these spaces, growth becomes accidental rather than intentional. These practices are not about rigid discipline, they are about awareness and choice. Some days will still be busy. Disruptions will still occur. Effectiveness does not eliminate complexity. It helps us navigate it with purpose. When we approach daily life with this mindset, effort feels more meaningful and less exhausting. As these habits become familiar, their influence extends beyond productivity. They shape how we learn, how we improve, and how we grow. The same principles that create effectiveness in daily life also apply to personal development. When learning is guided by intention, focus, and reflection, progress becomes deeper and more sustainable. From here, we can explore how effectiveness transforms not just what we do, but how we learn and evolve over time. Effectiveness and learning. A special focus for language learners. For language learners, the difference between busyness and effectiveness is especially important. Many students believe that progress comes from studying longer hours, consuming more content, and exposing themselves to English as much as possible. While exposure is valuable, effectiveness asks a more precise question. It asks not how long you study, but how you study. Two learners may spend the same amount of time with English, yet one develops fluency and confidence, while the other remains stuck. The difference lies in intention and method. Studying longer often creates the feeling of commitment, but it does not guarantee improvement. Hours can pass while watching videos, scrolling through explanations, or rereading familiar material. This kind of passive exposure feels productive because it keeps the learner busy. However, the brain learns most effectively when it is challenged, not entertained. Effectiveness in learning means choosing activities that require effort, attention, and involvement. It means interacting with the language rather than simply being surrounded by it. Active engagement is where real learning begins. Speaking out loud, forming sentences, asking questions, and testing understanding all require mental energy. These actions may feel uncomfortable because they reveal gaps in knowledge. Yet this discomfort is a sign of growth. Passive exposure avoids mistakes, but active practice embraces them. Effective learners understand that errors are not failures. They are feedback. Each mistake provides information that guides improvement. Reflection plays a central role in effective learning. Without reflection, practice becomes repetition. Reflection allows learners to notice patterns, identify weaknesses, and recognize progress. Simple questions such as, "What was difficult today?" or "What improved compared to last week?" turn experience into insight. This habit transforms learning from a mechanical routine into a conscious process. Over time, it builds independence and self-awareness. Feedback is another essential element. Learning in isolation often slows progress because learners cannot easily see their own mistakes. Feedback, whether from a teacher, a partner, or self-correction, brings clarity. It directs attention to what truly needs improvement. Effective learners seek feedback not for approval, but for accuracy. They understand that correction accelerates growth, even when it challenges confidence. Deliberate practice brings all these elements together. It focuses on specific skills rather than general exposure. Instead of studying English, effective learners practice pronunciation, sentence structure, listening accuracy, or fluency in targeted ways. This focused approach may feel slower, but it produces deeper results. Skills strengthen one by one, creating a solid foundation for communication. As effectiveness replaces busyness in learning, confidence grows naturally. Fluency does not come from knowing everything. It comes from trusting your ability to express yourself. When learning is intentional and reflective, progress becomes visible. Confidence is no longer based on hope, but on experience. For listeners of Code Your English, this shift is especially powerful. Learning English is not about filling your day with language. It is about choosing meaningful practice that moves you forward. When you study with effectiveness, time becomes an ally rather than an enemy. This realization opens the door to a broader reflection, not only about learning a language, but about how we choose to live and grow in a world that constantly pushes us to stay busy. For language learners, the difference between busyness and effectiveness becomes especially clear. Many students believe that progress comes from studying longer hours, watching more videos, or surrounding themselves with English as much as possible. While exposure is important, effectiveness asks a more focused question. Not how long you study, but how you study. Two learners may spend the same amount of time with English, yet one becomes fluent and confident, while the other feels stuck. The difference is not talent or intelligence, but intention and method. Studying longer often creates a sense of effort and commitment, but effort alone does not guarantee improvement. Hours can disappear while watching lessons, scrolling through explanations, or rereading familiar material. This type of learning feels safe and comfortable, but it is mostly passive. The mind receives information without being required to respond. Busyness appears, but progress remains limited. Effectiveness in learning means choosing activities that demand attention, participation, and thought. Active engagement is where real language growth happens. Speaking aloud, forming your own sentences, summarizing what you hear, and asking questions all force the brain to work. These actions can feel uncomfortable because they reveal mistakes and gaps in knowledge. Yet this discomfort is not a problem. It is a signal that learning is taking place. Passive exposure avoids errors, but active practice learns from them. Effective learners accept mistakes as part of the process and use them as guidance. Reflection strengthens this process. Without reflection, practice becomes repetition without understanding. Reflection allows learners to step back and ask meaningful questions. What was difficult today? What improved compared to last week? What should I focus on next? These questions turn experience into insight. Over time, reflection builds awareness and control, helping learners become more independent and confident. Feedback plays a crucial role as well. Learning without feedback is like walking in the dark. A teacher, a speaking partner, or even careful self-correction can reveal patterns that are otherwise invisible. Effective learners seek feedback not to feel good, but to become accurate. Correction may feel uncomfortable, but it shortens the path to fluency. Deliberate practice brings all of these elements together. Instead of studying English in a general way, effective learners work on specific skills. They practice pronunciation, fluency, listening accuracy, or sentence structure with clear intention. This focused approach may seem slower, but it builds strong foundations. Progress becomes deeper and more reliable. As effectiveness replaces busyness, confidence grows naturally. Fluency is not about knowing everything, it is about trusting your ability to communicate. When learning is intentional and reflective, improvement becomes visible. For listeners of Code Your English, this shift has immediate value. Learning English is not about filling your schedule with language. It is about choosing meaningful practice that truly moves you forward. This understanding prepares us for a deeper reflection. not only on learning, but on how we define progress and success in life itself. Redefining success in a noisy world. In a world filled with noise, success is often defined by visibility. We are taught, directly and indirectly, that to be successful is to be busy, fast, and constantly progressing in ways that others can see. Numbers, titles, schedules, and achievements become symbols of worth. Yet this definition rarely asks an important question. Successful at what? And for whom? When success is measured only by external signals, it slowly disconnects us from our own values. Redefining success begins with questioning these cultural assumptions. If success means constant movement, then rest appears as weakness. If success means speed, then reflection feels like delay. But when we look more closely, many of the things that truly matter cannot be rushed. Understanding, trust, mastery, and fulfillment all develop quietly and over time. They require patience, presence, and intention. Effectiveness, in this sense, is not a strategy for productivity, but a philosophy of living. Effectiveness becomes meaningful when it aligns actions with values. It asks whether what we do each day reflects what we believe is important. This alignment creates integrity. When actions and values move in the same direction, effort feels purposeful rather than draining. Without this alignment, even impressive achievements can feel empty. A full calendar does not guarantee a meaningful life. Direction matters more than momentum. Choosing depth over speed is a central part of this redefinition. Depth invites us to engage fully with fewer things instead of lightly with many. It encourages learning something well rather than quickly. It values presence in relationships over constant connection. Depth requires courage, because it often means stepping away from comparison and competition. It asks us to move at our own pace, guided by understanding rather than pressure. Building a quieter, more intentional life does not mean escaping responsibility or ambition. It means creating space to think, to choose, and to reflect. Quiet is not the absence of activity. It is the presence of awareness. In quiet moments, priorities become clearer. Decisions become more deliberate. Life begins to feel less reactive and more grounded. This quiet strength is rarely celebrated, but it is deeply powerful. This perspective invites abstract thinking because it cannot be measured easily. Success becomes personal rather than universal. It allows each individual to define what a meaningful life looks like. For some, it may involve mastery of a skill. For others, it may involve balance, contribution, or growth. Effectiveness supports all of these paths because it respects intention over imitation. As this understanding settles, the urgency to prove oneself begins to fade. There is less need to appear busy and more desire to be aligned. The noise does not disappear, but its influence weakens. From this calmer place, reflection becomes natural. And it is from here that we can move gently toward a closing thought, one that invites awareness, choice, and quiet confidence in the way forward. As we come to the end of this reflection, it may be helpful to release the idea that effectiveness is something you either have or do not have. It is not a personality trait, and it is not reserved for a special group of disciplined or talented people. Effectiveness is a choice, and like most meaningful choices, it is made quietly and repeatedly. It appears in small moments, often unnoticed by others, but deeply influential in shaping how life unfolds. Each day offers countless opportunities to choose between reaction and intention. These choices may seem insignificant on their own. Choosing to pause before responding, choosing to focus on one task instead of many, choosing to protect time for thinking or learning. None of these decisions are dramatic, yet over time, they create direction. Long-term outcomes are not shaped by rare moments of intensity, but by consistent patterns of behavior. Effectiveness grows not through force, but through consistency. Awareness is the foundation of this process. Before anything changes, we must notice. We must become aware of how we spend our time, where our attention goes, and what quietly drains our energy. Awareness does not demand judgment. It simply asks for honesty. When we observe without criticizing ourselves, clarity begins to form. And with clarity comes the freedom to choose differently. It is important to remember that choosing effectiveness does not mean eliminating busyness entirely. Life will always contain demands, responsibilities, and moments of pressure. Effectiveness is not about creating perfect days. It is about responding to reality with intention rather than habit. Some days will feel scattered. Others will feel focused. What matters is the direction, not the perfection. There is a calm strength in living this way. When actions are guided by meaning rather than urgency, effort feels lighter. Progress feels steadier. The need to rush fades, and with it, much of the anxiety that comes from constant comparison. Effectiveness creates a sense of trust in your own process. You no longer need to prove productivity. You begin to value impact. For listeners of Code Your English, this reflection extends beyond productivity and learning. It touches the way we grow, communicate, and understand ourselves. Language learning, like life, rewards depth, patience, and awareness. When you choose effectiveness, you choose growth that lasts. As you move forward, there is no need to promise change or set rigid goals. Simply stay curious. Notice what you do and why you do it. Notice which actions bring clarity and which ones create noise. In this gentle awareness, new possibilities appear. And in those possibilities, effectiveness becomes not a task to complete, but a way of living, chosen again and again, one quiet decision at a time. If this reflection resonated with you, take a quiet moment today to choose one action that truly matters. Practice your English with intention, not pressure. And if Code Your English helps you think, learn, or grow, support the journey by liking, subscribing, and sharing this episode with someone who needs a calmer, more effective way forward.